So hi everybody, nice to see you all, lovely to be here in Walla Walla. I have shocked the people that I came here with from Seattle. We all flew over on the plane this morning to Pasco and drove here. And they couldn't believe that I knew my way around. And I was like, how can you not know your way around Walla Walla? You've got to come here more often. So what I want to talk about today is early learning as serious business. So I guess I have a question to start out with. How many of you have ever been involved in a startup or know someone who's started up a company or in terms of business development have been engaged in that kind of work? So for those of you who have, you know that it's grueling, that you spend a lot of hours, it's very expensive, you're really hard on your finances, and you really work so hard because you want the business to reach its full potential. And you want it to be successful in the long term, so you put in as much effort as you can in the beginning in order to ensure that the long-term success of the company is there. And in order to do that, you have to give everything you have in those first few years. So you never start a business and then wait 5 years to start putting your effort into it and see how it does, because that's not how businesses survive. That's not how businesses do well. So I've been involved in 3 startups in my life. Their names are Frederick, Nicola, and Robin. And although full earnings reports are not in yet, my youngest is still a sophomore at Western, I can report that they are not as exhausting or as expensive as they were when they were startups. So as we were talking about, those first 5 years matter so much about the long-term health and success of all of the children that we are trying to raise. And it is the experiences that they have with their parents and in the different educational settings that they encounter, as well as the love that they feel and the support that they feel from their families and their communities that really shape the success in school and in life, their long-term health, and their ability to connect with others, something that will help them be successful in their careers and in their families as they are adults. So what's true at any stage of any startup, whether it's a business startup or a child rearing, is that when done right, the payoff can be huge. So the reality is that far too many of the children in our state are not getting what they need in that startup phase. They're likely to have a tough time following that, but both in terms of their educational success and the struggles that they might have in the school system, as well as their integration into society and adulthood. A lot of the time that's because they're born into poverty or into circumstances that delay their access to the kinds of supports that they need. And those are all circumstances that they didn't create. Those are all circumstances they're born into. We can see the opportunity gap in children as young as 9 months old. So we can already at 9 months be able to tell the difference between a child who has the supports that they need to be ready to enter school and the child that does not. So it should be no surprise that less than half of the children in our state are entering kindergarten not ready to be successful in kindergarten. We should be able to tell that. We should be able to know that earlier and get them the supports that they need. But all of that requires system building. It all requires something that we are trying to do in the state right now. But still, less than half of entering kindergartens are ready when they walk in the classroom door on that first day. So kindergarten entry was a long time ago for me, thank goodness. I always said that my favorite age was however old my oldest kid was, because it was so full of discovery for me as a parent. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to have the resources, both educational resources as well as monetary resources, to be able to raise my kids with what they needed to be successful in school. But for a lot of kids in the state, especially kids of color, kids from immigrant backgrounds, they don't have those supports, and they need more support from the community than they can get from their own families. The good news is that more people know how important things are in terms of valuing and investing in the early years than they have in the past. We are making great progress in that regard. And we're on the path to changing the statistics around the number of kids who are entering kindergarten ready to learn. Also, we in Washington State, all eyes in the nation are on Washington. We are a leader in early learning, and what's happening here is exciting. I want to talk a little about some of that excitement, so what some of those major efforts are. We are working very hard to make voluntary home visiting available to at-risk families, especially in rural communities that currently have little or no formal supports for families. That has been a big part of Thrive's work and a big part of what is happening in the state around the Home Visiting Services account. We are expanding and enhancing ECAP, which is the state-funded childcare or preschool program for families who are low income. We are continuing to implement Early Achievers, which is the state's quality rating and improvement system for childcare. And there are two important elements of Early Achievers. One is, as a rating system, it helps childcare providers know where they are in terms of providing really high quality childcare to the kids that they're serving. But it also helps families have a better sense of the quality of childcare that's available to them in their communities. Okay, now my cake's getting in my way. Hold on. We're also continuing to roll out a consistent statewide process around kindergarten readiness assessment called WAKIDS. And that input is not just a test, it's not standardized testing for kindergartners. It's actually a whole process that includes family members and preschool providers and kindergarten teachers to do a whole child assessment. It's the way in which we know that about half of the kids in the state right now are entering kindergarten not ready because of this really robust assessment system that we have in place. We're also phasing in state-funded full-day kindergarten as part of basic education in the state, which is exciting. And there are two things that the state are happening in the state that matter personally to me the most, maybe. One of them is really trying to uncover and address policies and practices and behaviors that perpetuate the opportunity gap. I came to early learning work in the 1990s. I worked for Children's Home Society. In fact, any of you who know Megan Anderson here, I was her boss long ago. And I came to the work, thought I was leaving social justice work to go into early learning work. And once I was there for 2 minutes, I realized, no, in fact, early learning work is fundamental social justice work. It really is, in some ways, the most important work that we can do to really help create opportunity for everyone. The other thing that matters to me most, perhaps, is working hand in hand in partnership with both local and regional folks, programs and community members, and state folks, the state agency folks that we work with, and legislators and the governor's office, to really work in partnership around this work so that we're sure that all voices are heard and that all ideas are considered, so that it's not a couple of people in a room making decisions that affect all of our children's lives. Because we want, as much as we can, to make sure that this work is done well, and without all of those voices at the table, none of this work could be done as well as it is being done. So I started at Thrive about 9 months ago. Before that, I spent about 2 decades in nonprofit leadership positions around the state, and then had a brief foray in the corporate sector. I worked for Boeing as leading their community investment in education. I'm happy to say I am very glad to be back in the nonprofit world, especially working on early learning. I think it's important to be part of an organization that is really working hard to provide a key leadership role in the debate around how best to serve the youngest children in our state, and what high quality really means, and what to do first, and how we pay for it, and all of those things. It's a very exciting time. When I was going through the process with the board about this position, one of the things that I really talked about was it's such a moment in early learning to have so many of our states, mayors, and county executives, and legislators, and the 3rd governor in a row talking about the importance of early learning and how we all need to be a part of that has really helped, I think, create a movement here. So to articulate Thrive's added value in this work, I want to return to actually points that I made in the speech that I made at our luncheon last spring, which, so for some of you, sorry, McCarthy table, you will have already heard some of this. But I think it's interesting to think about, that was very early in my tenure, and now that I've been here a while, this all still is really true. It all still really resonates. So as was mentioned, we are the state's lead public-private partnership for early learning. And it really matters that we exist in cooperation with the Department of Early Learning and OSPI and the Department of Health and the Department of Social and Health Services and the Department of Commerce and the Governor's Office. To have a private entity there, somebody who is representing the private sector, really changes the debate. And as much as I feel frustrated at times refereeing those state agency disagreements or debates, what I've learned is that my refereeing can keep the conversation going in a way that it might not otherwise. And so that really is a valuable part of what's happening. Also, our skill at connecting private entities with those public efforts really matters in terms of our ability to bring private resources to the table, to bring private business people to testify during legislative hearings in Olympia. All of that is a big part of our role. And also to be able to connect federal resources to state resources and private resources to see this work move forward that much more quickly. So as I mentioned, we're in very close partnership with all of those entities. We were formed at the same time as the Department of Early Learning, so that there would be that kind of back and forth. And partly because Governor Gregoire, who was governor at the time we were formed, really saw the ability to increase community ownership of the issue if it was not just another state agency doing the work. So sometimes we take the lead on what's happening on the initiatives that are being put forth in the state, and sometimes we really see that our best role is to step back and be able to provide some color commentary, if you will, to be able to talk about what's happening in a different way. And we really want to be there to be able to add value in whichever way is appropriate. An example of that, over the course of the last couple of years, we convened about 150 people across the state to create a racial equity theory of change for early learning. That was a whole series of very courageous community conversations to really get to what are the elements that need to be involved in order for us to eliminate race as a predictor of academic success. And we are now working with state agencies and regional coalitions and programs all across the state to be able to figure out how do we now that we have thought about what some of those essential elements are, how do we go about implementing programs that will change practices and help reduce some of the institutional barriers for communities of color in our state. So that leads me to eliminating opportunity gap, which is the opportunity gap, which is a huge part of our motivation and our work at Thrive. But it means investing in people and programs that support communities of color and prioritizing children who are furthest from opportunity so that we're sure that there is an equitable playing field across the state for all kids so that as many kids as possible are entering the kindergarten door with everything they need. We also especially pay attention to the opportunity gap in our own grant making. Thrive distributes a little over $10 million this year. And in that, we really want to make sure that equity is a fundamental and core principle of what we're doing in our decision making. Reaching families as early as possible is very important around our work. We are, in some ways, a pretty squeaky wheel in the state debate about early learning to make sure that it's not all preschool, it's not all like 4 and 5 year olds, but we're really making sure that birth to 3 is also a part of what we're looking at. That's fundamentally important to me. It's a big part of what really drives me about early learning. If starting early means starting before kindergarten, starting early really means starting at birth. Kids are learning before they're even born, and the more that we can do to help support their learning, the better off they will be. We also want to make sure that kids are in the strongest family relationships they can be so that we are reducing abuse and neglect as much as possible. The child welfare system would tell you that really birth to 3 families with kids birth to 3, that's the bulk of their caseload. And so the more that we can do to make sure that families are strong and healthy when their kids are really little, the more we can help reduce the burden on the child welfare system. We also remain committed to making sure that the grant dollars that we give lead to positive outcomes. We really want to base our work in evidence. We really want to make sure that the programs that we're working with are paying attention to not only how they're doing their work and that they're operating in the best way they can, but also that they're paying attention to the outcome of their work, that they're actually tracking what happens. So it's a big part of what we do internally. We have a whole group of people who really pay attention to our data and to fidelity to the models we're trying to implement and all of that kind of stuff. A good example of that kind of good grant making is we have what we call thematic grant making program focused on STEM education. And early learners and STEM might feel like a funny business to you, but math is actually the domain in the kindergarten readiness assessment where kids do the most poorly or the least well. And we really want to be sure that we're doing as much as we can in STEM to help libraries and children's museums and early learning providers and all sorts of different organizations work together to try to incubate great ideas, try to find new solutions, and try to integrate good STEM learning into their regular ongoing early learning programs. In particular, our thematic grant making program is really about local organizations figuring things out with our support and with the support of a network of other local organizations doing the work. It's very important in this work in particular because it's a pretty new field in early learning that there's a lot of local ownership over the issue because that's what will lead to sustainability in the long run. In terms of our change of direction, we are really increasing our visibility and our voice in the legislative process, really trying, particularly with the regional coalitions. There are 10 regional coalitions around the state, and trying to work with them to make sure that they have a strong sense of who they can talk to and what they can say and how we can be as supportive as possible in making sure that they feel like they are confident when they run into their elected official at the grocery store, they can walk up and say, hey, I want to talk to you about early learning and here's what I have to say. We also, part of that is we want to be sure that we are playing a role federally in making sure that Washington State has a voice in decisions that are made on the federal level around early learning funding for home visiting or through the Race to the Top program that the Department of Education has or that sort of thing. Fundamentally, we understand that Thrive does not hold all the answers, that we cannot do this work alone, and that really our best role is to be that convener and that supporter of the people doing the great work locally and the people doing the great work at the state. And if we can be a bridge to help make sure that everybody's voice is heard, that's a huge and fundamental part of what we need to do. That there are already hundreds of amazing early learning leaders in the state, and our ability to connect them together is a really important part of what we're trying to do. So all of this work rolls up to what we see as our 3 organizational goals, which are prepare every child for success in school, advance the field of early learning, and build a thriving system. These goals are our guideposts to ensure that we Thrive are playing our unique role in this work that's happening, not just at a state level, but in communities all across the state. So when Thrive and the State Department of Early Learning were created in 2006, Washington State was woefully behind in terms of developing early learning programs and a system for early learning. That doesn't mean that there weren't some amazing things happening before 2006, including right here around early learning. But in terms of statewide, system level, full-on approach, we were pretty far behind in terms of a national perspective. But in less than 10 years, we have become a national model, and we're the envy of many other states because of the partnerships and the bipartisan support and the family engagement that we have and our focus on high quality in terms of childcare options and programs, and our commitment to ensuring that race is eliminated as a predictor of academic success. All of that stuff together, I can't tell you how often folks come visit here, or I talk to folks from other parts of the country, and they all say, oh, Washington is such a leader in this work. How are you doing X? It's very inspiring to see that in such a short period of time, we have made such a great turnaround in the state, and it is in huge part because of the state level leadership we have had over the course of the last 10 years, but also maybe as much or more in terms of the local community level efforts that have been put in place. So voters see and support the difference they're seeing in our state. We just a few weeks ago did a poll of 400 likely voters in the state of Washington about a whole bunch of early learning issues, and I am excited that you are the first audience that we are sharing poll results with, and we will be releasing the poll later today. And here are some of the things that we learned. It doesn't matter, I'm going to read this part so I don't get any of the language wrong, because I don't want the pollsters to say I said something wrong. It doesn't matter where you live, how you vote, or if you have young children at home, 92% of the voters polled agree that the first years of a child's life have a significant impact on their ability to succeed in school and life. So that's pretty remarkable, 92%. 77% of the folks polled did not have children under 18 living in their homes. So we were not calling parents to ask these questions. We were calling a random sampling of voters across the state. So they also place getting a strong start in life as one of the highest state priorities. 74% said that this was important, a very close second to what came in first, which was increasing jobs and economic growth. So early learning got 74%, and increasing jobs and economic growth got 75%. So a 1 percentage difference in what people thought. And interestingly as well, we did a poll 5 years ago and asked the same question, and in the rank of 9 priorities, early learning was 7th out of 9th, and now it is 2nd out of 9th. That shows a huge difference in public perception about the importance of early learning. So 8 in 10 voters understand that by increasing the likelihood that children will be literate, skilled, and employed, we decrease school dropout rates, dependency on public assistance, and trouble with the law. I'm just saying. 3 out of 4 voters feel that it's very or somewhat important for the state to fund an education continuum that spans from preschool to 2 years of college. And in 2015, Washington State will no longer be receiving a federal Race to the Top grant that has been primarily funding our quality rating and improvement system. And about 2/3 of those polled support using state dollars to continue funding efforts to raise the quality of licensed childcare through that program, and better kindergarten transition processes through the WaKids program that I talked about earlier. So those are all very big developments in the course of time over public perception about what's important and how we should go about making sure that it happens. And these findings are not unique. These findings really mirror polling results both nationally and in other states about public perception. So we are seeing a really similar bipartisan support growing across the nation for early learning. So here's what I hope you'll remember and share out of these results. The momentum in our state for early learning is growing. More and more Washingtonians understand that we must increase our investment in early learning for young children and their families, or will pay later through remediation in the K-12 system or beyond. We're very fortunate in our state to have so many individuals and organizations statewide who are committed to giving every child in our state the opportunity to have a great start in life. And it will take every one of us to build and sustain this system. High quality early learning is important for every child, and it will take every one of us. Every one of us needs to be involved in building this system. Should I say it again, or are you good? Okay. So businesses succeed in thriving communities, and at the heart of a thriving community are thriving families. When families are healthy and strong, businesses can see their ability to recruit quality and ideally local employees because they know they can raise a family in the place that values education and successful families. And investments in early learning increase our global competitiveness and strengthen communities, especially the middle class. So the entire Walla Walla community, to bring this locally, should be extremely proud of all of the work that it has been doing to support our youngest children in the area and actually throughout the state. The coalition here has been very instrumental, a very loud voice in providing great examples for other coalitions across the state. So the Walla Walla Early Learning Coalition, which is headed by Deborah Peters, who is the host with the mostest, is really trying to increase connection and coordination of early learning professionals and K-3 teachers at a regional level, and is hosting shared professional development opportunities and doing targeted outreach on kindergarten transition for early learning providers. This is a big initiative for the state to undertake. How do we connect early learning and the K-12 system together in what's called P3, or preschool through third grade? In fact, the coalition hosted a statewide Starting Strong Institute just this summer. It's an annual gathering. This was the 6th time it's happened, the first time it's happened here in this region. But it's a gathering of early learning providers and P3 or K3 teachers and administrators. And it was a great success, a huge success. I had a lot of fun there. We are also very fortunate to have some legislators here who are big leaders, both in terms of your local initiatives and in terms of early learning. Representative Maureen Walsh, who is on our board, and Senator Mike Hewitt, who is a former Thrive board member, and also Terry Neely, who is here as well. We appreciate so much our work with legislators across the state to learn priorities. A big source of information for us in learning about local priorities is through our conversations with legislative leaders. You also have a police chief that gets it, and is here, Scott Bieber. Lovely to see you. You'll be seeing him on screen in just a few minutes. But also the sheriff, John Turner, the prosecuting attorney, Jim Nagel. There is some great law enforcement support for early learning in the state through an organization called Fight Crime Invest in Kids, which is a very loud voice in advocacy and early learning and a great partner of ours. And the business community here gets it. For instance, Ready Nation, which is also represented here today, which engages business people as early learning advocates, has a very strong presence in this region, and I would say a growing presence in this region, working very hard to make sure that in our legislative process, the business community's voice is heard in terms of the importance of early learning for the business community. I have the great privilege of working with 2 local business leaders, Jim McCarthy and Dennis Giese, who both serve on Thrive's board and have been great advocates both for what's happening in this region as well as great minds in terms of keeping the eye on the whole statewide picture. Of course, you wouldn't all be here today if you didn't understand, at least at some level, that early learning is important. I do, however, challenge you to do 2 things. One, to find other business people and talk to them about this issue and explain the importance of starting as early as possible in how we're getting the educational system going, and to make sure that they are here next year so that next year we can't fit in this room anymore. Or at least there are tables up here with us. So let's get back to the serious business of early learning. As I mentioned before, I came to Thrive from Boeing, and I was there for about 6 years. It was an incredible honor to be there representing that company with community organizations and community situations. And in part because Boeing is so deeply involved in education, really understands the importance of education, particularly the importance of early learning. Boeing is a company that takes the long view in terms of market analysis, in terms of product development, in terms of workforce training and planning. Understanding the value of an educated workforce is a part of what makes Boeing such a great place to work. and is also part of why Boeing is so deeply involved in education at an increasingly early stage. Because you think, oh, we need engineers, we better work with a college. Oh, kids aren't coming to college prepared to be in an engineering program, we better work in high school. Oh, kids aren't getting into trigonometry because they don't have the fundamentals. Boeing has really gone through an evolution over time and has really become quite a strong advocate, both in Washington State and nationally, around the importance of early learning for business. In fact, Boeing made its first charitable donation as a startup when it was less than a year old, which is almost 100 years ago. And the evidence of that can be seen in the wind tunnel that still stands at the University of Washington in Seattle. It is a testament to the lasting difference a company can make by making that kind of charitable contribution to support education. Which brings me to the first exhortation you will get today, which is that we are all here today to do the same thing. We are all here today not to build a wind tunnel, although I have to tell you, having been in a wind tunnel, they're super cool. But by contributing today to support the Walla Walla Coalition, and by keeping the conversation going in your own circles and helping to bring more people into this important work. All right, so I have prepared remarks, but I might not use them. So I know most of you in this room know Maureen, or Mo, and she is a real straight shooter. Like, she really gets things done. I said earlier to someone, one of the things I really affiliate with her because she loves to laugh, and all I ever want to do is laugh. And if you meet with her, you're going to laugh a lot. And especially given some challenges you've had in your life, it's amazing to see you are such a sunbeam. And I really appreciate that. Maureen has been involved in so much of what's happened in the early learning field in terms of legislative agenda, and has been a great supporter. She's a magnificent board member, and a lot of what has happened around early achievers, around home visiting, a lot of what we have been trying to do in terms of legislation has happened because of Maureen's participation. And I don't know if you know, but passing legislation is not easy. But Maureen knows a thing or two about sausage making. Thank you. Made that joke up myself. We really appreciate her expertise. So with that, I have two things for you. It's your little crayon bouquet.
All right.
And here it is, your Gold Crayon Award.
Oh,
thank you so much.
was as important as buildings or structures or roads, although those are important too. There are many projects out there, but few have the rate of return of early childhood investments, offering 10% annual rate of return. So for the same dollars, you can actually invest by training teachers and training children. But what comes out of it is a reduction in crime, the promotion of schooling, the fact that we're going to get a more skilled workforce in the future. There are very, very few government programs that have any return close to this. These rates of return calculations have not entered American